with a few chickens per farmer, we can engage millions of farmers with very little space. In fact, if you think of the data across the world, over 500 million farmers operating less than 10 hectares produce 70%, 70% of the food we eat in the world, according to the United Nations. That was a very important factor when we started thinking, well, as an agronomist, we swore in our graduation that our mission in life would be to feed the world. Now, if we're going to feed the world, I'm going to go back to that blueprint that fed us as children and got us out of poverty and hunger. And poultry is the only thing that can actually do that at that scale and engage people in a different way of thinking about the natural landscape they are influencing.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada-Gore. This is episode 144, and my guest is Reginaldo Haslett-Marroquin. Reginaldo is a fascinating man with a long list of credentials and experience to his name. I'll try to make it succinct so we can get to the conversation. Reginaldo received his agronomy degree from the Central National School of Agriculture in his native Guatemala. Later, he graduated with a degree in International Business Administration from Augsburg College in Minneapolis. He has served as a consultant for the United Nations Development Programs Bureau for Latin America and as an advisor to the World Council of Indigenous Peoples. He was a founding member of the Fair Trade Federation in 1994. In case you couldn't tell from that list, he is committed to lifting up indigenous people, and currently he is working with a poultry-centered regenerative agriculture model. Basically, Reginaldo is convinced that chickens can revolutionize lives and, yes, bring economic and social stability, not only in Guatemala, but all over the world. Yes, we're talking about a chicken revolution. On today's episode, he talks about just what that means, how chickens saved his own life in Guatemala, how we may be raising forest fowl all wrong, and his unique approach to raising them, and how chickens may be the key to alleviating food insecurity in various parts of the world. Before we get into this amazing topic, a quick thanks to the Weston A. Price Foundation, who helps make this show possible. Be a part of passing health to the next generation. Go to our website and just click on the donate button. Especially now during our fundraising drive, it's critical. Your donations keep projects like this show afloat. And thank you in advance for making a difference for us today and for the health of future generations. Also, we at the Foundation are all about building community. We want to get to know you and connect with you in person, so join us at any of our upcoming events. We have several live shows in California later this month and one in D.C. this August. I can't get over the all-star lineup: Paul Grieve of Primal Pastures, Hilary Boynton of Live Yum Yum, Mark McAfee of Organic Pastures Dairy, and Sally Fallon Morell in D.C. These are going to be amazing, and you really don't want to miss them. So just go to the events page on the Weston A. Price Foundation website, westonaprice.org, and click on the links and find out all about each one. And the pièce de résistance is our Wise Traditions Conference in Baltimore, Maryland this November, the 16th to the 19th. We will be transforming our health as we hear from top-notch speakers and enjoy amazing meals together. Go to wisetraditions.org to sign up today. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Reginaldo.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
You told me before we got rolling that chickens were essential to your survival in Guatemala as a young child. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, there is one thing about surviving physically in this world, and another one is surviving intellectually and spiritually and all of that. And for my case, and like the case for many of the children growing around me, chickens were central because we could get eggs, and eggs are such a nutritionally valuable food that it literally was the reason probably, I didn't turn into another statistics of children that, died from malnutrition or that ended up mentally underdeveloped because of lack of sufficient nutrition as children. So I learned about chickens because of that need to interact with them and to care for them and to ensure that we had those precious eggs on a not daily basis, but at least regularly enough that we could get enough of that, food. So that's kind of the beginning of my story, and then, of course, evolves from there into what we do now.
Tell us what you do now.
Well, it was a long, convoluted roundabout to get here, but fundamentally, my whole life has been about agriculture. And I went to school in Guatemala to learn about conventional agriculture and non-conventional, organic, and so on. But I grew up in a space where we needed to understand nature from a very different and more fundamental standpoint, and very scientific, but not necessarily validated by people with PhDs behind their last names. And so that upbringing and that knowledge and that science that we learned as kids was central to the formation in terms of how to see nature as a source of well-being, as a source of nutritionally valuable, nutritionally dense foods, and so on. I went to school to further understand what I grew up with in that environment. I was trained on a lot of other things, but always kept gravitating towards that original, more ancient-based, science and learning. And one of the things that happened is that despite having gone around the world and done a lot of other things, started many companies doing different things from forestry to craft to coffee, one of the things that kept calling me was, can I get back into this space without having to become a traditional farmer like everybody around me here in Minnesota? This is many years later, having migrated from Guatemala to Minnesota in 1992 and looking for an opportunity to get back into farming and only finding corn, soybeans, confinement cattle, pork, chickens, turkey, and just not finding that at all one bit appealing, and trying to reincorporate into my life in the U.S. that knowledge and that eagerness that I grew up with to engage with farming.
So I hear what you're saying, Reginaldo. We are all about wise traditions from people who didn't have all those letters behind their name, like you said. So I'm tracking with you completely. So when you got to Minnesota, what I hear you saying is you didn't want to do things the conventional way. You wanted to do something that harkened back to those traditions of your ancestors.
Exactly. And in this country, in the U.S. at least until recently, that kind of knowledge wasn't really appreciated, still not appreciated in the mainstream, and it's not validated as a real way of actually transforming our landscapes and the way we eat and live and all of that. And even our spirituality is grounded primarily on the way we interact with nature and with each other and so on. That knowledge is really what I wanted to put to work. And it wasn't until 2006, 2007, when I started noticing that the market was actually changing in this direction at a scale that was more possible to think at a system level rather than just on a farm level for me. And so this urge to get back into this space and, equipped with that way of thinking wasn't exactly compatible with the way most of the market was and the farming systems here work. So that turning point, which I assume it was a turning point, it didn't necessarily have enough access to information to know whether the trends were more permanent. But I had seen organic farms, coming around me, and surge of community-supported agriculture, more consumers wanting to engage directly with farmers. And that was enough indicators that things were really changing. And then looking at the National Agriculture Statistics Services data, I started to watch some of those patterns also shifting in terms of more ownership by minorities. And as a Guatemalan, I had to make sure that I incorporated that into my planning. So what I ended up doing was coming back and putting together a blueprint for a farm that I wanted to see emerge here where I live in Minnesota. And my first attempt actually failed, and I described that in detail in a book I wrote. It's called In the Shadow of Green Man. And I told the story of my the first attempt at getting back to farming in Jordan, Minnesota. And then we lost that opportunity, lost a lot of money that we had saved up, and moved to Northfield, where I am now, and continued in that same path, with the difference that the land here was much smaller. In Jordan, I was looking at potentially up to 40 or 50 acres that I could manage. Here in North Hill, I only had 1.9 acres where the house is also located. So I had to go back and think, so how do I become part of this landscape while applying my farming skills and knowledge and all of that? And the way I could do that was, instead of thinking of myself as a farmer, thinking of myself as an engineer and as a designer of systems that other farmers could adopt.
So what did you do? How did you overcome that failure and that discouragement to suddenly get a successful farm? I understand the acreage was smaller, but what did you do that was different?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the failures in my life have no impact on my drive. That's something that a lot of folks need to understand of entrepreneurial minds, is that we thrive on failures, and I don't necessarily understand the loss of the farm opportunity in Jordan as a failure, but rather as one of those learning opportunities of things not to do. And so coming to North Hill with less space, yet with the same drive, I realized that, okay, materially, practically, trying to make a living on around 0.9 acres, which is what was available to grow things, was not going to work. But I could demonstrate the new way of thinking that I had been living with in that space, and then use that space to excite, motivate, and demonstrate how many farms could be transformed. And, it was a long shot, obviously, and my wife was nervous when we borrowed the first, took the first loan out on our new purchased house to be able to do that. But basically, what we did was we put together a blueprint that is, again, poultry-centered, based on that original, eagerness to re-engage animal production as a foundation of regenerative farming.
So Reginaldo, this is exactly why I wanted to have you on the show, because we often talk to people who use cattle to regenerate the land and understand the importance of rotational grazing and how that regenerates the land, et cetera. But I haven't talked to many farmers who use poultry. So please explain to all of us a little bit of your system.
Yes, fundamentally remember that cattle and trees aren't what regenerates the landscape. In fact, they are not the ones who have degenerated it. It's people who do that. And one of the foundational tenets of our approach was to ensure that it was people-centered. Now, one farmer in western Nebraska can farm 40, 30, 20,000 acres with grass-fed cattle. And also cattle are very, very limited in terms of natural blueprints that are compatible with cattle grazing. Now, chicken, on the other hand, with a few chickens per farmer, we can engage millions of farmers with very little space. In fact, if you think of the data across the world, over 500 million farmers operating less than 10 hectares produce 70% of the food we eat in the world, according to the United Nations. That was a very important factor when we started thinking, as an agronomist, we swore in our graduation that our mission in life would be to feed the world. Now, if we're going to feed the world, I'm going to go back to that blueprint that fed us as children and got us out of poverty and hunger. And poultry is the only thing that can actually do that at that scale and engage people in a different way of thinking about the natural landscape they are influencing. And so when we get people behind something, then normally we can change the landscape. Trees and animals, they will survive beyond us if we don't take care of this landscape that feeds us. So within that context, is we came, let's take poultry and put it back into its natural, geologically framed or defined blueprint in terms of the landscape. And chickens are jungle animals. And so based on that original blueprint that you can find anywhere, any scientist that has researched chickens in their background will attest to the fact that poultry, you can look at 100 factors about poultry. All of them are associated with them being inside or under a protective canopy. And there is a lot of plants that have evolved naturally to interact with poultry in ways that other animals have not been able to accomplish.
So, Reginaldo, tell us, how does this work in Minnesota as opposed to Guatemala? Like, how does this work in different parts of the world?
So basically, the chicken operates under the same idea. So if you are a chicken, let's play chicken for a little bit. What you see is predators in the air, predators in the ground, and your job all day long is to find food and to feed yourself and to grow and reproduce and all of that like every other organism. Now, for the poultry, it's essential that there be a canopy because the aerial predators have the things during the day that they are most afraid of. And so the canopy is what protects the chicken, also cools the ground. It also generates more biological activity. And chickens being omnivores, they primarily go for the proteins, and that bugs and things that crawl are the things that they're going to go for first. And so in an open space, that's not really possible. So what we did was, okay, what if we were to develop a process by which we can restore those canopies, different levels of canopies, for the poultry to be grazed under that space anywhere in the world. And so what we did was, instead of saying, oh, you plant X, Y, and Z, we said, here is a process by which you identify the different native species in any ecology in the world that will support that multi-story structure that the poultry needs in order to live, healthy and produce healthy products, and also restore the landscape, in this case, perennial cover that is crucial for the not only the poultry, but to protect the soil, to sequester more carbon. And every time we go around that process, we are identifying species that are highly valuable for the economy, for the ecology, and for the food security of those communities. So in Minnesota, for example, we picked hazelnuts and elderberries as the foundational canopy. Oaks and basswood and sugar maples as the upper canopy. And then on the bottom of that, we sprout grains that provide most of the forage for the chickens as they roam under that forest. Now, in Guatemala, we picked on the lower part in the northern rainforest, which is different than the eastern part where it's drier, and the species also change within the country. But in the northern rainforest, the basic canopy is this palms that produce a fruit. It's called pacayas, and the pacayas are actually an ancient food of the Maya and the communities in Guatemala. So that's the first thing. Then above that, you can put coffee, you can put cocoa, you can put other productive species like bananas, avocados, tangerines, oranges, and so on. And then above that canopy, you can put zapotes, which will grow up to 100, 120, even higher altitudes. And so you manage those different canopies for large-scale production of food, and you eliminate completely all of the inputs that normally farmers have to be bringing into their farm, spending a lot of money, time, and all of that to bring those in. And on the other hand, a lot of those resources, inputs, especially fertilizers and so on, don't they get taken up by the soil because they are by the plants because they are not readily available. And then they end up in the water and so on and polluting. In this case, you eliminate all of that. The only input that comes into the system is some extra poultry feed because the system is intense enough that the space under the forest is not enough to grow all of the food that the poultry needs. And so that input of energy that comes in the form of feed turns into manure that then the poultry spreads all over the canopy and provides that grounding, fertilization, and cycle of energy that then makes everything flourish and produce in excessive amounts of what normally people are used to. Yeah, well, in Minnesota, we are producing in excess of twice as many hazelnuts per bush than we are producing, where the chickens are present, than in the spaces where there is no chickens. And in Guatemala, the bananas and the avocados grow totally different where we put the poultry versus where we do traditional, manipulation of inputs.
Well, I am just envisioning these chickens must be the happiest chickens in the world when they're surrounded kind of with this canopy that is local. And it's just the beautiful kind of symbiotic nature of managing things sustainably with just the right conditions depending on the region of the world. And it reminds me of some conversations I've had with Joel Salatin, just about how nature kind of knows what to do if you have your eyes open. And it sounds like you do. Coming up, Reginaldo explains who dubbed this movement the Chicken Revolution in the first place, and how that name expresses the strength and determination of the people to fight for their rights to food, to farm, to raise local species, to a healthy environment, and much, much more. We pause now to recognize our sponsors. The Weston A. Price Foundation, they are behind this show 110%. And we are a member-supported organization. What does that mean? We need your help to keep going, basically. We are committed to your health today and to providing accurate health information for future generations as well. We communicate all that we know through print, through this podcast, through the website, and we advocate for your health and food rights on many levels. If you appreciate what we are doing, join hands with us in passing health to the next generation during this, our fundraising drive. Just go to westonaprice.org/donate to contribute a gift of any size. For donations of $100 or more, we will send you a thank you gift of our Wise Traditions Starter Kit. For $250 or more, we'll send a copy of Sally Fallon Morell's latest book, Nourishing Diets. And for donations of $2,500 or more, you can have dinner with Sally Fallon Morell and her husband, Jeffrey, and take a tour of their farm here in Brandywine, Maryland. So go to our website and actually make a gift of any size to keep all of this important work going. And thank you in advance for making a difference for future generations. We at the Foundation are also committed to community, by the way. So that's why we have many upcoming events to get to know one another face to face. On July 25th, I will be at Primal Pastures in Murrieta, California, interviewing Paul Grieve. On July 29th, I'll be at the Herschel Family Farm in Malibu, speaking with Hilary Boynton, the lunch lady extraordinaire. On July 31st, I will be at the Friend Nature Center in Sierra Madre, speaking with Mark McAfee of Organic Pastures Dairy. And on August 18th, I will be in D.C. with Sally Fallon Morell and local farmers at Wilson High School. Basically, all of these events are available for your information, and so you can find out about tickets on our website, westonaprice.org. Click on the events button and find out more information and how to get tickets right away. You're going to want to do so because these events are going to sell out quickly. I hope to see you at any of these, and if you can't make those events, please join us at the Baltimore Conference, November 16th to the 19th. It is a fantastic culmination of all that we do all year long. We get all of the speakers together, we connect with one another face to face, and we learn how to transform our health. Join us at the Wise Traditions Conference. Go to wisetraditions.org for more information and to sign up today. So, Reginaldo, I wanted to ask you, some people say there's like a chicken revolution afoot. Can you talk to that? Is that true?
Well, that's the Guatemalan team ended up dubbing our system the chicken revolution. It's really hard to speak of revolutions in a country that suffered like Guatemala because of an armed revolution. And so this gave license to our partners there to speak of revolution without falling into that same trap. So chicken revolution is benign enough, language-wise, but strong enough, revolutionarily speaking, to be able to combine it into a new way of thinking about Guatemalans, about our revolutionary spirit, and the fact that the injustices of, capitalism and all of that have generated so much poverty, hunger, and malnourishment and dependency in our communities, that spirit is not gone, and that we are just finding new ways to bring it back and to excite people to continue to fight for their rights, the right to food, the right to farm, the right to the local species, the right to a healthy environment, healthy water, clean water, all of that, which has been decimated by the incredible impact that the industrial systems have had in our countries, especially as they deforest the landscape to put in imported species that got no business in that space, especially like oil, palm oil, and and other monocultures that truly are responsible for well over 60 to 70% of the loss of our natural habitats. So this is one way to show people a different pathway to resist that and to also reclaim our rights as rightful owners of that landscape and rightful stewards of, and capable stewards of that same landscape. It doesn't look like these other systems have any interest in the health of the planet, the people, and the ecology. They just see money everywhere. They see us an open space and disregard the incredible amount of wisdom that is sitting right there waiting for an opportunity. So we use so much manipulation and so on, including the idea that we are creating jobs and wealth when we destroy the very thing that actually produces it.
Wow, those are powerful words. And I think your kind of revolution, this chicken revolution, is something we can get behind, because if I'm hearing you correctly, Reginaldo, it sounds like you're saying this system can be replicated. And not only can it be, it should be, because it's good for the planet, it's good for the farmers, it's providing food to the people, and it can be profitable for these farmers as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is being now scaled and replicated, and we're mobilizing tremendous amount of people, land, resources, and markets now to start this revolution everywhere we can have an opportunity. The profitability thing is also very interesting, how poorly we understand farm profitability and how we tend to think of it in a very myopic, linear way when we think of, say, often they say, well, how does it compare to corn? Well, it doesn't. Poultry and corn are very different things. So how do you get, what do you get per acre? Well, there is no per acre return on investment. Well, so how do you measure it? Well, we don't measure an individual output of the farm. What we measure is the overall impact and output and wealth creation of the whole integrated system. And so we're looking at eggs and meat, and we're looking at nuts and fruits and vegetables, including large production of garlic that we are now are capable of doing with almost no external inputs because of the poultry. And it is the combination and the output and the wealth creation of the circulation of all of those values and value creation that actually gives us a sense of the not profitability, but the well-being and that we can build, we can create by producing and managing natural resources this way. And so if you just want to look at what you get for a pound of chicken, yeah, sure enough, we sell that for $3.25 direct to consumers, up to $4, and a farmer can bring home, say, $1 per every chicken that they raise. But that's such a myopic, linear, insignificant way of thinking of the profitability of a system that we reject and we resist the urge to engage in that level of, low level of conversation. In other ways, we want to engage in a wise conversation, integral, holistic conversation about what farming profitability really is and farm systems profitability.
I can make a parallel when folks go to the grocery store and they want to get what fits within their budget, let's say, and they buy food that ultimately damages their health. If they are just looking at the bottom line in terms of number, they are being short-sighted. In terms of numbers, they are being short-sighted. And in effect, what you're saying is there's more to what's best here than the bottom line financially.
Yes, and the bottom line actually comes out really healthy when you integrate energy flows through the farming process. And so, for example, for us, the only input we're paying for here are, the seed, the labor we put in. At the beginning, the seedlings that we got to plant in the farms so that we can create those canopies and so on. But at the end of the day, what we're doing, and we always repeat this when we are training farmers, don't look at yourself as a producer. We, farmers, we don't produce anything. Nature is the only one that is capable of producing things, from carrots to chickens to eggs, all of that. We don't produce them. Nature does. So what is it that we do? We are managers. we manage two basic things. We manage the process and the space and the flow of this and that, element that goes into the process. But most importantly, if we don't manage that according to our main role, which is managers of energy, then those other things that we do can be really wasteful. So what we do is we think of ourselves as energy managers. And so we're bringing energy in the form of feed, which gets turned into edible products, meat, eggs, nuts, fruit, vegetables, and so on and so forth. And when we manage energy, one of the things that you realize really quickly is how much energy is available for free, floating in the air in the form of CO2, ammonia, and all kinds of other forms, minerals even, that are floating around and also in the ground, that come into play to form these things that we can now eat and sell and make money on. And so when you think that way, your actual cost in terms of cash cost is very low, and your marginal value is very high. Now, not all of that value that you capture can be sold for money. Some of it needs to be kept for regenerating the landscape so that the cycle never ends. Mm-hmm. And part of that understanding of energy has to do with the fact that more than 80% or 90% of the biomass that you see floating out there in the form of trees and carrots and so on is actually coming from the air and from water. And so when we think of it that way, we are actually only harvesting about 30 maybe, and there's no real scientific fact behind this, but scientists I talk to say that we probably are harvesting between 30 and 40% of all of the free energy that we have captured through our system. And that's what we are selling, but we didn't have to pay for most of it. The feed is the only one that we paid for real, with hard cash, our labor, and maybe if we hired someone else from outside of the farm, we are paying for that too. But as a system, you think of regions of farms, not as a single farm. And as a system, we can actually capture so much more energy than we are harvesting, to the point that that's the foundation of the regenerative concept that we operate under. And under that concept, the money flows according to where the energy flows. And a farmer, a traditional conventional farmer, is allowing a lot of their money to flow out of the farm because they are not managing energy. They are managing inputs and outputs. And that's a fundamental concept that we haven't yet grasped at a scale in this country and around the world, so that we actually start understanding what does it really mean to be an efficient farmer. Has nothing to do with machines, has nothing to do with the speed by which you harvest corn or soybeans, or by the amount of chickens or pigs or cows that you can put per square foot in a building. Has nothing to do with any of that. It only has to do with how we manage energy in the process of transforming it from non-edible in the ground and in the air to edible in the form of eggs, meat, and vegetables, and so on. That's really the true foundation of how we can become wiser as we manage this beautiful landscape we were given by creation for us to survive on. And we are wrecking it left and right as if it didn't matter.
These are powerful words. And Reginaldo, I can sense the passion and energy behind your delivery of them. So thank you for bringing those today. I just have two final questions for you. One is, if someone is kind of sparked and inspired by this conversation today, and they want to become a part of this chicken revolution, where should we send them? How can they get started?
Just go on to mainstreetproject.org. That's one word, mainstreetproject.org. And you can get in touch with us. Also, look us up as Regeneration Midwest if you are an organization leader, executive, and want to see farmers you work with become part of this system. The next level platform we're putting together is called Regeneration Midwest, and we have a Facebook page that you can make contact with us through. Also, if you are an international organization, a foreign agency like USAID, like Inter-American Foundation, like Member of Congress, or so on, go to regenerationinternational.org. So those are the three main layers of organizational infrastructure we have put together to truly build a chicken revolution in your word.
Well, Reginaldo, that's awesome. We will put those links in the show notes so folks can access them quickly and easily. And I want to ask you one final question that I often pose at the end of the show. If the listener could just do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Don't buy fake food. Fake food normally comes in the form of big brands and barcodes and things like that. Choose, to the extent that you can, real food. It normally is something you can touch. You can go to the farmer to look where they grew it, grow it in their own backyard, and resist the urge to just go and buy the cheap. The cheapest the food, the faker it is.
Wow, that is such a good point. Thank you so much, Reginaldo. We look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we made it work.
We did. All right, take care, Reginaldo, and we will keep in touch.
Thank you.
My guest today was Reginaldo Haslett-Marroquin. To connect with him, go to his website, mainstreetproject.org. And for the show notes from today's episode and highlights and links to resources we mentioned, just go to our website, westonaprice.org, and look for the show notes for episode 144. If you are enjoying this podcast, go ahead and subscribe through Apple Podcasts. And you can rate and review us while you're there. Thank you so much for doing so. We read every review, and we really appreciate your support. Next week, everybody, we have the unstoppable Zen Honeycutt of Moms Across America with us. Zen is a mover and a shaker, a true activist for our health and for our children's health. In particular, she is concerned about GMOs in our foods, and she is doing something about it. She is the author of Unstoppable, and you will feel inspired by her activism, and you will feel that very same way, unstoppable, after listening to that episode. So stay tuned. Right now, I want to offer a huge thank you to our team of podcast interns. Post-production assistants include Deirdre Beard, Diva Rizvi, Melanie Ahern, and Ari O'Hara. Cheryl Huftelin helps with social media. Mary Hine, Olga de Villiers, and Cynthia Castro-Cohen-Enriquez boost sponsorship and help with special projects, along with my dear friend, Joy de los Santos. Our listening team includes Heather Carpentier and Victor Coseto, and Amy Matias helps with transcriptions. Last but not least, everybody, stay in touch with me. I'm on Twitter at Holistic Hilda. I'm also on Instagram at Holistic_Hilda. I hope to do some IGTV segments with some of the farmers and amazing people I'm going to be with in California and in DC this fall. So stay tuned and follow me. Go to my website, holistichilda.com, so you can stay abreast of all the activities I'm doing. I'm a connector, and I really want to help you on your health and your podcasting journey. So if you want to meet with me for a 15-minute consult by phone, I'm happy to do that if you want to start a show or just improve what you've got going on. I'm here for you, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Have you been enjoying these podcasts? Have you benefited from them or from the resources on the website or local chapter meetings? If so, please become a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's only $25 for students and seniors and $40 for a general membership. Your contribution is critical for the continued work of the foundation. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.